The revolution will be developed into the following stages: digitization, cyber security, Internet of Things, managed services, document management, and business applications. We provide business transformation and ICT solutions with presence in 13 African countries and 2 European countries. We are your leading partner in integrated platform providers, innovation leaders, standalone products, and innovation pace setters. Tamani Technologies and Systems, delivering value across continents.
Make massive moves.
How can you say that?
That is what it is.
Your mother eloped with someone else.
I just think this is such a genius idea. I think it's amazing.
I can be happy.
It's inside you. It's inside of all of us.
It's about cooking smart that are nutritious and delicious.
President Trump acknowledging the coronavirus death toll could be significantly higher.
We don't want to do this.
There is nothing you can take.
Jerusalem.
Surviving roommates scared.
The heavyweights arrive.
Inside, finds Petulia, blocked by Jane.
This is the will of God.
Make massive moves with Starsight. Make massive moves with Starsight.
Live with me on our Sankofa show this morning is Professor Dr. Mpofu, taking us through the decolonization project. How best do we make sense of our past into our present? You were explaining something very interesting to me, how the ancient kings would be referred to vis-a-vis the modern kings and the modern politicians, where people, even modern pastors, by the way, you know, what is the difference in terms of that systemic shift?
It comes from the fetishization of power, where leaders are in actuality afraid of the people and not afraid of evil. When leaders are afraid of the people, then leaders have to grow thorns, they have to grow teeth.
Bodyguards.
They have to be monstrous and create technologies of commanding and not leading communities and societies.
Something very important. They are afraid of people. They're not afraid of evil.
Yeah. What you have largely in Africa are commanders masquerading as leaders. That's why you have persecutions, tortures, the installation of fear in the minds and the hearts of the people. Leaders must be feared.
Genocides,
yeah. Genocides, yeah. And other forms of large-scale violence that keep people in captivity. It's because leaders...
I've never understood how you can go to a bush or a village and ask for people to vote you. Then you come back 2 weeks later with 26 bodyguards to protect you from the people.
Yeah, because elections themselves as a mode of negotiating and navigating power have become regular rituals in Africa, a lottery of men and women where powerful people select each other and are not actually elected by the people. And thanks to coloniality, to native colonialism, racism, tribalism and all that, elections in Africa are an ethnic census. You just need to come from the bigger tribe, from the bigger ethnic group, then you win elections, which is not an authentic, just and liberated way of navigating.
It's not honest.
And
it can be manipulated. It can be manipulated.
Yeah, it's feja. It's actually a manipulated system.
Yeah, reminded me of my olden days. I grew up in Blue Air, you know. So when you speak feja, I actually I see these guys. I see these guys. What do you call this place?
Yeah.
When you are going
up Street.
Yes, and you find this guy with the cardboard box there. These leads of Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Then he puts one piece of paper and says, "Guess where this is?" And
yeah.
There you go, that feja. You know?
That's how power is navigated and negotiated in Africa. It's a gamble. And it takes the whole system of politics into professionalism, not vocationalism, where leadership was a responsibility, not an opportunity for an individual and his family and his friends to loot, to amass wealth, and amass power itself and exercise it in
at the expense of everybody else.
Yeah.
Everybody. I might want us to move, maybe just for this small little section here, for a couple of minutes. The systematic regionalization and maintenance of colonial borders, and how systemically or systematically it has been able to be driven from marriages, which form families, which form the community, which form the districts. From the districts, then you have the provinces. The provinces wiggle themselves into what you might want to call a nation, and then the nation into regions, or SADC, or COMESA. By the time you're actually finishing the conversation on Africa Union, and you look at this body that is supposed to be a direct body that should speak to United States of America, where 52 states come together to formulate
a formidable body.
And here you are in Africa Union, and to date, it has not crossed your mind that you are being treated as countries, where you must be there actually to help Africa to be treated as a continent. Because how can a country fight a continent? How can Botswana with 800,000 people, 900,000, fight China with 1.3 billion people? Intellectually, financially, and otherwise, you are bound to be sodomized. You're bound to lose. And this for me has been actually my biggest cry on the greater continent, that every African president who thinks he can actually face up China as a country is a joke. Because until the continent of Africa can discuss with the continent of China, the continent of Europe, the continent of America, then I think in terms of muscle,
there's no
1.4 billion people talking to another 1.4 billion people. That conversation is equal. Where we have one army, we have one currency, we have some sort of unity, which you are talking about, some sort of Pentecost, which you're talking about. And as long as Africa is dealing with Western, Eastern, Northern continents as countries, I want you to address the greater United Nations and the systematic alignment of the colonial project, right from the Africa Union down to national governments at the bottom of the table.
Yeah, actually, what gives me the confidence to make the strong allegation that Africa and the global South at large still exist under native colonialism is that the divisions, the classifications, and the hierarchizations that were instituted by colonialism have not been undone.
They're maintained.
Yeah. And I allege, and I seek to do this forcefully, that African governments and the states that are a direct derivative from secular colonialism exist to enforce rather than to undo colonial divisions, classifications, and hierarchizations. And that is division, that is classification, that is hierarchizations. They are the critical planks on which coloniality still stands in Africa. The reason why we still meet each other as foreigners, as aliens, in the African
illegal
continent.
Immigrants.
And we are not able economically, politically, and otherwise to negotiate with the greater part of the world because we are divided. We exist in pockets, in little provinces and silos that are not agreed on how Africa should be run, that are not agreed on which direction and at what pace should Africa go. So once we deal with those divisions, those disunities, then one day there will be a strong Africa that can speak and act in the world with confidence and with strength and some results. So disunity and divisions are
I want you to start
the resources of coloniality.
I want you to start putting some pegs on the ground, because I'll bring you on the latter half. But I want you to start putting some pegs on the ground. I hear you mentioning unity. I want us to start looking at some of the possible solutions that you could have in your conversation in terms of rewriting, remodeling, restructuring the greater African politics, whether it be indigenization or in culture, or it could be education. It's quite the platform is quite wide, so it's not like only one shoe fits all. I would want to hear you beginning to give us some few solutions around these conversations. I hear you mentioning unity as one of the first key items. But again, unity has been spoken for the past 60 years, from the days of Kwame Nkrumah, Kaunda, from the days of Robert Mugabe, and the whole ANC was able to move around Africa and finding refuge in Morogoro, in Tanzania, and in Nigeria, because there was a conversation in the background that we're bringing Africa together. So unity has been spoken, but unity has never been implemented. So I would want you to engage on that and say, how can we actually translate this conversation from a kitchen talk, a table talk of we must. Really, if you are supposed to be sitting down right now and you have a project of uniting Africa, can you start pinning some pegs on the floor and say, if I was supposed to run this as a project, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Z?
What we are saying there, Maponga, is that since Kwame Nkrumah, Nyerere, the founding fathers, Kenyatta, and Kaunda, and others, what happened to the grand ideal of unity is that it was reduced to a slogan. The great ideal of pan-Africanism itself, which is the ideal of African unity, was sacrificed on the altar of nationalism. Nationalism became the toxic ideology that eroded pan-Africanism.
The bit of socialism.
Because nationalism and pan-Africanism do not work in the same direction for the same purposes. Nationalism emphasizes nationhood inside our colonially given borders of South Africa, of Zimbabwe, of Malawi. It emphasizes clans, tribes, ethnicities, and other groupings. Whereas Pan-Africanism is a political and historical gesture that asks us to put in the back seat the clans, the tribes,
and put the continent in front.
But because of fear, Sabelo Ndlovukachene has written about how the ideal of Pan-Africanism failed. Because of fear of losing power in their individual countries, some African presidents, the great ones amongst them, resisted the unification of Africa. And Mwalimu Nyerere was one of the people that were leading the resistance to the unification of the continent. And some of them were saying they fear that Nkrumah wants to be the president of Africa. He wants to be a continental
Yesterday, Gaddafi came and he was talking the same language.
So, there's a way in which nationalism cost Africa its unity and did so dearly. The moment our framework of thinking politically is our tribes, our nations.
I want to throw a curveball. Is it possible, and all due respect, and I want to say this classically that the educated African who finds himself himself at an academic institution of the West and is being taught by the West, that even at the coming back of Kwame Nkrumah, to talk about democracy to an African community becomes toxic in its own way, because you are assuming already a different form of governance to your people as contrasted to your indigenous ways of governance. And look at how that ideology of democratization of Africa cascades itself throughout Africa. We look back now 60 years at the project of democratization of Africa, and you can see that this is a failed project. Because country after country, president after president, the circle is the same. Here we have Ghana, here we have Mau Mau in Kenya, here we have Chama cha Mapinduzi in Tanzania, here we have Ibu Africa, South Africa, Mkondo Wesize, Chimurenga in Zimbabwe, SWAPO in Namibia and Angola. And you look back and say, every time democracy is declared, and as you rightfully put it, an anthem is given, and the flag is given, the people of that country have actually adopted and been reduced to a lesser quality of life than they were during the time of colonialism. It's not embarrassing to talk about Zimbabwe, for example. The roads that were built by Ian Smith, the present government is failing just to fill up the potholes. The railway lines that were built by Ian Smith in the 50s and 60s, right now, the railway line itself is being stolen.
Yeah, native colonialism, Maponga, works by actually perfecting what was started by secular colonialism. The native colonialists that masquerade as our leaders actually exist to perfect what the seculars started and to take it to its logical conclusion. Because as you speak about Zimbabwe right now, the same conditions socially, politically, and historically that forced young men and women to go into the bush to fight a liberation struggle are back in existence, and they are in full gallop. How do you explain that? A good 4 decades after what is supposed to be decolonization.
That was bombed at my grandfather's farm when we were fighting the Smith regime. There was a bridge at the bottom there that was bombed. Then, 1975, 76. Boom. And the slogans were being given as young boys who were heading cattle. We're bringing Zimbabwe. We're bringing in Zimbabwe. These army trucks you see, we're going to use them for carrying manure into your fields. We were excited. Zimbabwe is coming. It's sad to tell you right now, to cross over during the rain season to my grandfather's farm, I must do 60 kilometers. That bridge has not yet been repaired.
And the trucks are still carrying soldiers.
They have not yet started carrying manure. Maybe to me that's a serious transition.
That one is a metaphor that really spectacularly dramatizes what I mean by native colonialism and the system of political managerialism, where our so-called leaders are actually accessories and functionaries of the colonial world system. Because you have leaders that are black marketeers, that are striking deals,
auctioning
with the international
resources and auctioning countries, auctioning people. And what is more painful is how dare the modern politician creates debt which he will not pay, but he's leaving it as a legacy on the necks of the younger generation. And you say, you are the future. You are the future. But you have exhausted your present money. You've eaten all of it. You've eaten all the coffers dry. You begin to eat into the future.
Definitely.
And you leave this as debt for your children.
And that paradox where physically Africa has a bounty of resources. And that bounty of resources is not translatable into the daily lives of the people of Africa. That paradox must be cracked. It's a cliche to ask that question and to make that statement that Africa is rich in natural resources.
When you cannot quantify that,
how then are Africans not living
the life of that wealth
and experiencing that wealth?
I want us.
It's an equation.
I want us to do a project.
Yeah.
I want us to do a project, but just for the 5 minutes before we snap off for the break.
Yeah.
I would want us to step a little bit onto the Zimbabwean politics, strategically so.
Yeah.
Because I would want to pick up your mind on the construction path of the country as a whole. If we are supposed to have the country in our hands, what are the possible solutions around the conversation of the politics of Zimbabwe?
Where we should begin, my brother, is in the politics of naming. I think I've kept on pondering on the issue that we're living under native colonialism. You have Zimbabweans right now that are fighting for human rights, that are fighting for democracy, that are fighting for openness of the society, that are fighting for free and fair elections. In my observation, in all those struggles, we are fighting a false struggle. That does not answer.
You're reading my mind, yeah.
That does not answer the strong questions of the day. You do not fight native colonialism using colonialism instruments and tools.
You are back to ground one.
First, we must look this monster in the eye and say, here is native colonialism. It's working through these native colonialists. How do we undo it? What is needed is a liberation struggle from native colonialism. How do you fight a liberation struggle? There are resources, there are passions, there are insights. There's a knowledge system that you need in order to fight a liberation struggle. And without engaging those resources, those technologies, you are wasting your time. You dance in circles. The elections were rigged. People are being tortured. Women are being raped. That's what colonialism does. It's there to do that, and that's how it enforces, normalizes and naturalizes itself through torture and violence. So fight colonialism, then human rights, then free and fair elections, then democracy.
But on that one,
are going to realize
on that one, me and you must cross swords. When, by the way, we don't need to agree. We don't need to agree.
We don't need to agree.
According to your Pentecost explanation, we don't need to agree. But I want us to argue intellectually, so that when you say that as Africans we are fighting for democracy, all right, is this what people are looking for? An ideology? Or are people not looking for bread? Is bread democratic? Are people not looking for resources to live healthy lives? This whole conceptualizing of a democratic country to an extent that you can mobilize a country to fight for democracy, has this been an ideology from the grassroots of what people want? Or this has come as an external information to the people that when you have access to democracy, this is what we can actually become. Because we may, as you rightfully put it, we may end up fighting a battle, but we find that the battle we're fighting, the ideology we're fighting, again goes back to say immediately a democratic. Are you not now officially again retrenching the same colonial system from which you are running away from?
I wanted you to cross swords with me, but we have just aligned our swords, which is okay. The warriors, the women, I start with women deliberately, and the men throughout Africa, not just in Zimbabwe, that left their homes to go and fight against secular colonialism, did not go there to fight for democracy. They went there to fight for liberation. But when they came, specifically in 1980 in Zimbabwe, they said we have won democracy. How can you go to hunt a kudu, then you come back and you have won a fish? The purpose of the hunt was not to bring home a fish. It was to bring home a kudu. In the process, the struggle, not just in Zimbabwe, but throughout Africa, lost its course. You go to the bush to fight for liberation, you come back, you have won democracy. And democracy has proven, especially here in South Africa, that it can live pretty well with inequality. It can live pretty well
if it is not the
with
fuel.
Violence.
If it is not the fuel.
And democracy can live quite well with the injustice.
With evil.
Where other people keep the land and others live in the peripheries of the land.
The Constitution must become the referee.
And the Constitution actually moderates and invigilates that crime,
conscience,
where in the name of property rights, in the name of the law, those that were dispossessed of the land must remain landless, and those that
have it
dispossessed
are being
others
protected by a piece of paper.
Definitely.
When you come back after
that
the break,
dramatizes the problem.
I think I'm enjoying this other part. I think this thing is just getting started now, where we are now. It's nice sometimes. I thought I'd lost my mind, but when you hear someone else bouncing ideas in the same line, I think it's quite comforting. When you come back after the break, let's see what these young kids can do for us and share with us some dances and some ancient moves. We the old men, when we were young, we also thought we were hot, But let's give it to the young people to share some tricks here.
This is not your ordinary cooking show.
The show where we do all things amazing, all things African.
Over here, we educate.
Avocado seed, it lowers cholesterol, controls blood sugar and blood pressure.
We heal.
Mpofu is good for your immune system as well. This here cures sugar, the blood sugar, blood pressure.
It's all about organic conversation.
So in here you've got yourself a nice vitamin C, you've got garlic, which is your natural antibiotic.
Oh wow.
I can't wait.
Great one. Be entertained. And purely African food.
And this is how you finish it up. With a slice of lemon, you just dig in and you eat and you get healthy.
Welcome to the home kitchen.
Coming soon on Galaxy Universal Network, Channel 500 on StarSat.
Make massive moves.
How can you say that?
That is what it is.
Your mother eloped with someone else.
I just think this is such a genius idea. I think it's amazing.
I can be happy?
It's inside you. It's inside of all of us.
It's about cooking smart that are nutritious and delicious.
President Trump acknowledging the coronavirus death toll could be significantly higher.
We don't want to do this.
There is nothing you can take.
Surviving roommates scared.
The heavyweights arrive.
Inside, finds Petulia, blocked by Jane.
This is the will of God.
Make massive moves.
This is not your ordinary cooking show.
The show where we do all things amazing, all things African.
Over here, we educate.
Avocado seed, it lowers cholesterol, controls blood sugar and blood pressure.
We heal.
Mpofu is good for your immune system as well, because here cures sugar, the blood sugar, blood pressure.
It's all about organic conversation.
So in here you've got yourself a nice vitamin C, you've got garlic, which is your natural antibiotic.
Oh wow.
I can't wait.
Great one.
We entertain. And purely African food.
And this is how you finish it up. With a slice of lemon, you just dig in and you eat and you get healthy.
Welcome to the home kitchen.
Coming soon on Galaxy Universal Network, Channel 500 on StarSat.
Make massive moves.
How can you say that?
That is what it is.
Your mother eloped with someone else.
I just think this is such a genius idea. I think it's amazing.
I can be happy.
It's inside you. It's inside of all of us.
It's about cooking smart that are nutritious and delicious.
President Trump acknowledging the coronavirus death toll could be significantly higher.
We don't want to do this.
There is nothing you can take.
Surviving roommates scared.
The heavyweights arrive.
Inside, finds Petulia, blocked by Jane.
This is the will of God.
Make massive moves with StarSat.
Would have failed, of course. I would have failed, rather, as a Zimbabwean, to allow such a proliferated professor to walk into my space, and I don't dig holes around him and get as much information as I can, in terms of also just have an honest conversation on the history of the Zimbabwean community, and possibly find some few solutions around the polarized political terrain of the country, even if possible. Look at some of the injustices and the destructions and the genocides of the previous regimes, mending the wounds, building bridges, and creating a new narrative. It was always interesting, and if not painful, that when local people are at war, that the colonizer actually sits in the terraces and claps his hands and watches. Because as long as we are fighting each other, business is good. And that's why you would find that the death of 45 people during xenophobia does not cause the business to be closed down. But a death of one white man on a farm, it must be declared as a national crisis. Then you wonder, what is the sanctity of life? I want us maybe to drag a little bit. In your own historical space, take us through the history of Shaka, Mzilikazi, and the building of that kingdom. Fully cognizant of the fact that you are dealing with an extension of an empire of the greater Zulu monarchs and the movement of the Angoni tribes, Mzilikazi being the regiment and the movement that he did throughout Southern Africa, the Ndebele space, the Pedi space, the Tswana space, and coming to the Karanga space, and finally settling in the lower Bulawayo, creating for us there close about 3 to 4 million people right now of South African origin who are living in Zimbabwe. Very interesting to note that they are not being called foreigners on that land. But when we come into South Africa here, we're being called foreigners. And it's amazing that one Zulu person in South Africa can kill one Ngube person from Zimbabwe. Are you saying that the people in Zimbabwe must kill the 3 million who are directly related to you? Then you understand again what we are talking about here. It's not just wasting time. When we understand the history, where we are coming from, we should begin to have progressive conversations that unlock, maybe if possible even diffuse some of these emotional temperaments that are fully charged. Yes, we're angry. People died. But then what? What do we do about it? What is the way forward? How do we consolidate and wipe away our tears and actually discover that brothers were killing brothers, sisters were killing sisters, and we have remained with a legacy of division where we must start building our nation. I want to just throw over to you, maybe take us through a beautiful Matabeleland conversation in terms of a political alignment.
Okay. Yeah. To begin with, I think, Maponga, we need to observe that the history of the Zulu nation and the history of the Ndebele nation, just like the history of other nations in the global south, now need to be liberated
also
from their captivity to colonial narratives. If one asks me to speak about my king, that is Ushaka, and that is also Mzilikazi, I want to think about those kings in excavatory terms. How do we excavate them and have the typical Shaka, not the stereotypical Shaka, and have the typical
human being
Mzilikazi, not the stereotypical Mzilikazi. You have narratives from Peter Becker that will tell you that Mzilikazi was Umzilawekazi, the path of blood, and that others will say Umzilikazi, the name actually means Umzilagazi, the big road that Mzilikazi traveled from KwaZulu-Natal to Bulawayo. You mean Mzilikazi's parents knew that he was going to travel that long road? He was given that name when he was young. So how did they say Mzilagazi before they knew that he was going to do the great trek? So these are small, minute constructions that mean a lot.
But they must be defragmented, they must be deconstructed.
How have these kings and their nations been named and constructed in the colonial order of knowledge making? Mzilikazi was born to Mashobane, the son of Mangete, and Nompetu, the daughter of Zwide. Yeah. In 1790. And that generation of people were born into the struggle for survival. And the struggle against colonialism itself.
The monster was beginning to show its face.
These were products of struggle, and these are people who lived struggles. There was respect between Ushaka and Mzilikazi from their tutelage by Udingiswayo, Ugodongwana. And that respect led to a fact where when Mashobane had been killed, Mzilikazi did not justifiably align himself with Zwide. He decided to align himself with Dingiswayo and Dingiswayo's people and Ushaka. And then he became a trusted general and lieutenant. But these were peers as generals, as warriors, and as leaders. So in 1822, there was that disagreement between Mzilikazi and Shaka, the king, over the distribution of the loot in Khomo, and the treatment of soldiers. Mzilikazi's approach was Dingiswayo-like. Shaka's approach was Shaka's approach. And Mzilikazi attracted a lot of respect, admiration, and love from the impis. And Shaka attracted fear. But these were brothers. The colonial narrators will tell you that Mzilikazi escaped. Mzilikazi retreated. These were two bulls that could no longer exist under one kingdom, because Mzilikazi was becoming a de facto king in stature and in the respect that he was earning. And that was making governance impossible. If Shaka wanted to pursue Mzilikazi, subdue him and overcome him, he would have done it. Dingiswayo tried it later. I think it was around 1836, when Mzilikazi was fighting with the Boers in Fekopie, and he took advantage of that and followed up, but was beaten back. Shaka had no will or desire or determination to follow and fight with Mzilikazi. He would have. And maybe he would have succeeded. But the army that Shaka and Mzilikazi controlled, he was going to have divided loyalties, because these were fellow
generals,
warriors and generals in the same kingdom. So Mzilikazi's movement from KwaZulu-Natal was a retreat. And he did it with Shaka's understanding and possibly appreciation. But what the colonialists... It
was wise. It might have ended up a war.
Wisdom demanded that the two could not...
Between the two bulls,
northwards. He actually left with a group of people in 1823. Trekking down all the way to Mozambique, then back to what was called the Transvaal. There were battles there that were fought between nations and kingdoms. But the colonial narrators will emphasize Mzilikazi's fights with Amanzunza and other Ukodongwane, Makodonga in Mpumalanga here, and how he was killed by Mzilikazi's impies. Those are exaggerated and amplified into what was Mzilikazi's political identity. The battles that Mzilikazi fought with the Boers in defense of the land and in pursuit of territory and governance are not amplified, are not magnified as the battles. They want to portray Mzilikazi as the butcher of others, the tyrant that drank other people's blood. That's why they say Umzilawekazi, the path of blood. But there were ferocious battles that Mzilikazi fought, mainly in 1836 with Potgieter, the Steyn family, Erasmus, and other Afrikaner families and groups that were infiltrating into the land in search of gold and institution of their power and control. Up until 1837, that Mzilikazi decided to trek northwards, further across the Limpopo, troubled and persecuted by the secular colonialists, not escaping Shaka or escaping Dingani, as our kids are taught in the primary schools. So that narrative has to be liberated itself.
He was seeking for a peaceful space.
What caused the movement of Mzilikazi across? In Mfecane itself, if you follow the critical narrative of Professor Julian Cobbin, Mfecane was caused by secular colonialism, not by the greed or the evil of black leaders and their people. So that's how Mzilikazi and his people found themselves across the Limpopo. There was no Zimbabwe at the time. There was no South Africa at the time.
Correct.
There was
land,
which was then sliced up, divided, and these people were told that they were strangers to each other. And Mzilikazi did not move from KwaZulu with a pure group of Zulus that he took all the way up to Bulawayo. They were picking up Soto people, they were picking up people of other nations, language groups, and cultural groups on the way. But you will get it narrated in the colonial textbooks and Eurocentric testaments that there was this group of Zulus that moved in one journey and went to Zimbabwe, and
that's not
one day they must go back. Or conquest itself and these processes that included Mfecane is fond of producing foreigners out of any group of people, however harmoniously they are living. Tomorrow morning you wake up with new foreigners. That's what nationalism as a colonial project, ideology and project does. Nationalism produces foreigners every day. We can sit down here and say we are a nation. Tomorrow morning the question is, by the way, when did you arrive into this nation? Whose son are you? Whose daughter are you? You are the new foreigner. And native colonialism produces foreigners, natives,
loud and clear,
and every day. So Mzilikazi's journey was a liberation journey. It was a journey against colonialism. It was a journey in resistance to the Boers, to the settlers that were tormenting, persecuting the people, dispossessing them of the land, and displacing them from the same land, up until Mzilikazi found himself in KwaBulawayo. And he did not arrive together with the main party. You know that controversy about the Indunas that arrived first. They did not see Mzilikazi for a year and put Nkulumane in his place as king, because Inwala annual festival and ceremony was approaching. That happened. And what we are told in the progress of that construction, that Mzilikazi was a blood drinker, you are told that he then came and executed all the Indunas and sat on the throne and killed his own son. That's how evil Mzilikazi is portrayed. But the truth is that when that problem happened, Mzilikazi arrived, those Indunas that had now taken their heads off for Nkulumane were sent back with him. And Nkulumane trekked back to to what is now called South Africa, and settled in Poheng. Up to today, we can visit his grave. It's there, and it's marked as Mzilikazi Inkosi Yamandebele, because Nkulumane was now Inkos, and he died as Inkos, fighting together with the people of what is now called Rustenburg, resisting the settlers that were infiltrating into the land, displacing and dispossessing the people. So that is the decolonial, and let me say true narrative of Mzilikazi's journey from KwaZulu to KwaBulawayo.
Because my grandfather came in contact with the regiments in 1864, 1865, and I had a narrative straight from his own lips that these guys came and into the eastern part of Zim there, and also their own interactions. In terms of food and security and cattle and women and all those stories. And again, I was just in reflection when how ironic actually that the Gukurahundi journey starts off on the same path that was actually the food transportation between Matabeleland and Mashonaland. And actually, hence you find there's a mystery in terms of history, sometimes trying to put and re-emphasize the darker sentiments that are right there, that when people are being trained here at Mashingo 41 barracks, and they start moving towards the Gukurahundi and the genocide that happened, that they were actually wrongly informed again in terms of information, that we are fixing this thing that happened in 1864.
The production of aliens out of other nationals, the creation of victims out of fellow men and fellow women is a result of our native colonialism. That is a derivative of secular colonialism. And these secular colonialists did pursue Mzilikazi all the way. You remember in 1847 to 1851, there were countless battles that were being fought. Mzilikazi is still resisting these people, not resisting Shaka.
And all those
not resisting Shaka, not resisting Dingan, not resisting Umagodonga, but resisting the secular colonialists up until there was that treaty in 1852, which was brokered by Abo Robert Moffat and other missionaries. So the legacy of Mzilikazi should be looked at as a legacy of the struggle against colonialism, not a struggle of black people versus other black people.
Let's move one step forward. Let's move one step forward, and maybe now that we know that there is a polarity directly between the south and the rest and the north of Zimbabwe. In your own world, I'm just asking maybe to reflect and maybe look around and say, what are the possible solutions? How best do you think you can solve this problem?
To go forward is to go back. We need to decolonize history and decolonize historical narratives that pit people against each other. Such things as the Guguraundi genocide are produced by nativist political ideologies that are derived from people in their misknowledging of each other. If me and you encounter each other as foreigners, as opponents, as enemies, definitely conflict is going to lead to violence. In decolonizing the history of the nations of Africa, we need to undo the colonial stereotypes and the colonial passions.
I'm trying to push you very hard. I want to push you very hard in terms of a real practical solution. Yes, let's rewrite the history. Let's publish the books and
create new imaginations of the self and the other.
Physically talking. You're an African, so I'm not scared of punching you a bit harder on that.
Please,
physically and practically speaking. But let's go back a little bit. When there was a misunderstanding between nations, when there was a misunderstanding between tribes or between families, or I came to your family by accident or by intent, I killed one of your children or your uncle. How did we use to resolve those issues? And when we understand how we used to resolve those things in the past, the second question will be, in our modern generation, is there some DNA in the past that we can look in terms of dealing with the crimes that have happened in the present day so that we can begin to find common ground as we're finding a solution?
It goes back to what we talked about earlier as in colonial modes of politics. Liberatory modes of politics are like this. We can coexist as opponents and coexist as rivals without our relationship degenerating into enmity. You can compete and contest for resources, for political power itself, for economic access itself, without escalating the competition into enmity. The escalation of competition into enmity, where the other has to be eradicated, where the other has to be destroyed, is colonial. It's colonial conquest that said those that are resisting have to be erased, have to be finished off. Africans can compete for resources and for political power as adversaries, as rivals, as opponents within the same political system without becoming enemies.
I was trying to squeeze you into an emotional alignment of nations. And I'm saying so deliberately, understanding also that the sentiments of the heart cannot be lied about.
Cannot be lied about. The passions.
But the paperwork, hence you can sign an agreement between ZANU-PF and ZAPU, and the paper will say we are now working together. But when you walk away from the piece of paper, the emotions of the nation are still quite sore. And I was trying to push you quite a bit and say let's actually look not just at the broader paperwork. If we are supposed to do this thing at an emotional level, where one morning Babu Ndiweni angayekhala phansi noma shingaidze and but how mfethu how mehlo madala man really, and I'm not I don't want to be cosmetic.
I'm going there. What happened, Maponga, you can listen to me say the struggle for the liberation of Zimbabwe itself got colonized at some point. In its getting colonized, how do you colonize a struggle? It's where those that were fighting colonialism began to use colonial ideologies and tactics in fighting that colonialism. You remember the fights in Morogoro and Mgagawe where the Prakadas were slaughtered. And the struggle is within the struggle that Professor Masipula Stole wrote about, where leaders began to eliminate each other, assassinations,
I lost an uncle,
Tepo and others, and where zebra cutters and Zanla cutters could not encounter each other without shooting at each other, and the Rhodesians would watch in glee as these liberation war fighters were shooting at each other. And the Nigerians say when two brothers fight, it's the stranger that reaps the harvest. The people that were fighting colonialism began to admire the colonialist. They began to admire colonial power. Yeah. So when we got what was supposed to be independence in Zimbabwe, what happened is that the people that took power were now proper native colonialists that were only ready to implement colonial politics and not decolonial politics of liberating the people, emphasizing the relationships, not the tensions and the conflicts amongst and between the people. So what is needed there is a vision
of that.
Yeah, and an invasion of political modes. What kind of politics are we going to use to correct the injustices, the problems that are on the ground in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Mozambique, in Angola, and elsewhere in the global south? We cannot use colonial passions, colonial sensibilities, and colonial strategies to decolonize and liberate the people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
We need to get the Rhodes inside ourselves, the Ian Smith inside ourselves, evicted, so that we can then engage as liberators, not native colonialists that emphasize others being foreigners, others being aliens, and others being enemies.
Embracing our history, that's what I'm hearing here. When we look back at where we are coming from as an African people, we have had quite an illustrious history. Some of it not so good, some of it quite victorious, and they're amazing enough that our history is only recorded when we are fighting each other. Our history is not recorded when we are fighting the enemy, and the enemy has not left. The enemy still stays with us and lives with us, and any intention possible to cause an African to fight another African, that becomes an ululation in the United Nations and in the nations that are foreign to us. But what we must be talking about as Africans, stop and think. Why must you be hating and fighting your fellow brother when your fellow brother is in the same situation with you? And we needed to start identifying the enemy that is amongst us and place them in their rightful place. Because, look, when they are talking their own story, we don't come on those pages as human beings. We appear on those pages as resources, as obstructions to their endeavors. We appear on those lists as the indigent, the uneducated, the uncivilized, the primitive. I had a new one in South Africa, the poorest of the poor. And you want all these classifications of human beings to such derogative language that puts them on the margins of the economy. And this is the language of all the political parties right now, the indigent. And how can it be addressing the owners of the country in such language? And I want to maybe just before we take a small little break, but I'll bring you back. I want to sit around with the two from the Twagazi space and pick up their minds. And I would want you to listen attentively, because when I'm done with them, I want you to come back and reflect on what they will have said about the greater African history, particularly on the Twagazi, Mzilikazi, Kumalo, Kamashobane. Dr. Mpofu, it's not the first, it's not the last time. Me and you, we got unfinished business here.
Definitely.
Yes, we'll just take a few moments and take some water and drink, and yeah, it's a long show. We'll see you shortly after the break.
Thank you.
Tech Talk brought to you by Tamani Technologies and Systems. Tamani Technologies and Systems takes leadership in fourth industrial revolution. The whole world is facing a transformation. The revolution will be developed into the following stages: digitization, cyber security, Internet of Things, managed services, document management, and business applications. We provide business transformation and ICT solutions with presence in 13 African countries and 2 European countries. We are your leading partner in integrated platform providers, innovation leaders, standalone products, and innovation pace setters. Tamani Technologies and Systems, delivering value across continents.
Make massive moves.
Bible is human and divine.
It's important for us to remember.
And I'm part of God's story.
Yeah, mama, hey.
God is healing you.
God says what he means, and he means what he says. God is good.
I am very grateful to God. I am healed.
Amen.
Make massive moves with Starsight.
This is not your ordinary cooking show.
The show where we do all things amazing, all things African.
Over here, we educate.
Avocado seed, it lowers cholesterol, controls blood sugar and blood pressure.
We heal.
Mpofu is good for your immune system as well. This here cures sugar, the blood sugar, blood pressure.
It's all about organic conversation.
So in here you've got yourself a nice vitamin C, you've got garlic, which is your natural antibiotic.
Oh wow.
I can't wait.
Great one.
Be entertained. And purely African food.
And this is how you finish it up. With a slice of lemon, you just dig in and you eat and you get healthy.
Welcome to the home kitchen.
Coming soon on Galaxy Universal Network, Channel 500 on Starsat.
Make massive moves.
How can you say that?
That is what it is.
Your mother eloped with someone else.
I just think this is such a genius idea. I think it's amazing.
I can be happy.
It's inside you. It's inside of all of us.
It's about cooking smart that are nutritious and delicious.
President Trump acknowledging the coronavirus death toll could be significantly higher.
We don't want to do this.
There is nothing you can take.
Surviving roommates scared. The heavyweights arrive.
Inside, finds Petulia, blocked by Jane.
This is the will of God.
Make massive moves with Starsight. Make massive moves.
The space race has already started. Russia had got the first object into space.
The coast is as wild today as it was when Europeans settled the continent.
Enormous beasts with enormous thirst. The teams are primed and ready.
They got the first animal into space, and they got the first person.
Time to see what the boys can do.
Make massive moves with Starsight. Make massive moves.
Isn't that your daughter's bib? But the truth is, I feel like Arabella's always with me.
Don't you ever forget this man's face. He killed your brother.
Don't shoot. Please don't shoot. Don't shoot.
Make massive moves with Starsight.
Kwamnandi lapha eAfrika namhlanje sivakashele ngabantu abadala ababuya izweni likaMzilikazi. Mzilikazi kaMashobana ubuya kwaBulawayo. Kwantuthuziyo ziyathuma kwamfazi ushaya indoda. Phela masinyendoda kuphela masinyendoda kuphela inyama ya. Kwantongazwelele. Kwantuthuziyo ziyathunqa. Yeah, all the way from Bulawayo. I grew up in Bulawayo by the way. Mfana wase Mpofu lapha eMahova lapha eMaflatsini. Block 47 ke lapha eTotal. Yeah. guess you did not know. Yes, I have two guests with me, Umancube lapha noMkhwananzi, representing the Greater Mthokazi tribe. And let me hear you with ngubani ke wena?
Ngiyabingelela ama-Afrika amahle, ngibingelela ngumzukulu kaNkalo uNlondunungu sitshe sihle sihlela amakhosi. Intombi yaseMancubeni, intombi zamankathi izilangathela ihle ugabadela unhlansi malandela alandela lo shona kunini. Bangazitha. Sikhalize emkhonto umzila kalandela olandela ezibambezeli.
That's my totem, yeah. Singomzila nkatha phela thina yabona ke. Uncube ke thina ngomfene. Isho ke Mkhwananzi.
Umkhwananzi ngiyabona umama uyazikhaya kakhulu lapha mina kumele ngihaye ngabanye. Kodwa hayi ngumhabahaba owaciba ngomkhonto esikhwebesini kwaphepha inkosi yamantungu. Uyawazi amantungu. Nguye kumzilikazi kaMachobana. Bathi obaba omkhulu yibo abakwaza ngomkhonto. Bathi umhabahaba wayeveve emoyeni, bathi wayegijima phezu kwamadoda kungathi udle intelezi engaziwayo. Kodwa ke hayi singazihaya kuze kuse. Inkosi kayiqeda.
Wow, inkosi siyabonga Mkhwananzi, siyabonga ke Mzilankatha nithe nasivakashela. Thank you very much for spending some time and coming to see us here on our program Sankofa. And the professor was here a few moments ago talking about the Mthokazi history, talking about the Mzilikazi history, and sharing with us some information as to exactly the formation, the the greater political conversations with the Zimbabwean community. Here you are on my show. What do you want to tell us about the greater Ndebele tribe? I see the dressing is quite illustrious and loud. Can you take us through your fashion here? What are you saying here?
Okay, as you can see, what I'm wearing is imvunulo yami because mina as an upcoming artist, I just design impahla engifuna ukuzigqoka what suits me and what I'm comfortable with. So most of the imbatho yam I just design
yourself.
But I'm not run away from being Nguni. As you can see, you can tell even if angeke uzokwazi ukuthi isithe Ndebele or a Zulu or what, but you can see that I'm Nguni. So impahla zami engizigqokile ngiyazidesignela. This is my crown. It's my crown, and again, it's indlula. What do you call indlula?
Crown.
Yeah,
it's fine.
It's indlula, and it's also a crown. Okay. So what I'm wearing, kahle is me.
This is you.
This is me.
In the 20s. How did you come up? You just woke up in the morning, but no cock, but did you dream about this, or you just woke up in the morning and you decided I'm going to make my own? What inspired? What inspired such an illustrious look?
It's just something that came into my mind, but most of